This is Mayor Walensky with a driving markets. Let's have a look at what will be driving markets in 2024. So the main economy to look at is the US. Obviously, the UK, Europe, Australia, Canada all feed off the US because that is the powerhouse at the moment economically, globally, regarding economic production and regarding overall health of the global welfare and economy moving into 2024. However, you need to look at government debt in the US. At the moment, the plan is to issue $2 trillion of government debt in 2024. So what's the problem with that? The problem is there's no money to pay the interest rate bill. The US effectively is spending more and more money on welfare, social security benefits, arms and defense than it is getting revenue in, whether it's from taxation or from GDP or sales. When looking at GDP, 42% of GDP is defense spending, which is not really producing anything productive for the economy. So going back to the $2 trillion worth of debt. Now this debt is going to be a mixture of new debt and refinance of old debt. So the refinance of old debt was at much lower interest rates. Quite simple. It's like taking out a mortgage or home and you have to come at the end of 5 years or 10 years, you have to refinance the deal or go on to another deal with the bank where you were paying from 2010 1% or 2% interest. Now you're going to be paying 5, 6 or 7% interest. The government in the US is going to have that problem. They've got to now refinance hundreds of billions of debt and issue new debt at a much higher yield, a much higher interest rate. Now, when you issue debt at a much higher interest rate, the money has to come from somewhere for you to pay that yield, pay that coupon, pay that interest. So now the typical interest rate that the US will be paying in 2024 will be anywhere between, depending on interest rates, 4 and 5%. But with the Fed looking to cut interest rates dramatically, what they're trying to do is they're trying to save the regional banks and save the Fed a load of money on interest rates, because if they cut interest rates, then the yield, the amount they have to give over to the investor that's going to be holding that US Treasury bond is going to be much, much lower. And that's one of the reasons why the Fed is so hell-bent on cutting interest rates, because they simply don't have the money to pay the interest and therefore could be heading for a default, if not a default, further downgrading by the credit reference agencies. Not only that, there's less and less people want the government debt. Less and less banks are looking to take on government debt because they don't trust Uncle Sam. They don't believe he has the money or the wherewithal in order to pay the debt. So now that China and Saudi Arabia have stopped buying US government debt, you're only left with the banks and the investors, or the retail investor who is treated by the Fed and the governments as a fool. And the banks now are demanding a higher coupon, a higher yield on taking on that government debt. So the US Fed is in a difficult, the US Treasury is in a difficult situation because they're going to have to offer higher yields in order to attract investors, and yet they don't have the money to pay it. What's likely to happen? So you're going to have interest rates that are suspiciously going to fall in 2024. That's going to be started by the Fed, and the other central banks who are all waiting for the Fed to make the move are going to follow on suit. And what that's going to happen is that effectively what you're going to have is inflation rising, because inflation hasn't gone away. Inflation is still there. So as a result of them cutting interest rates, you'll have a rise in inflation. And as inflation moves up, that'll put more pressure on companies' earnings and on companies' profitability, because they're going to have to spend more money on buying in the necessary resources in order to provide those goods. And when they spend more money or have less profitability on their balance sheet, they're going to do what? They're going to lay off staff. So unemployment is going to rise. So all of these interest rate cuts, if you follow them through, are going to be a complete waste of time. What's going to happen is you're going to have inflation resurfacing in 2024, you're going to have rising unemployment, and you could even get to stagflation, which means you're going to have higher inflation with no growth. The numbers coming out of the US are fake numbers. They're not real. They're being massaged and manipulated. And even though they're looking to cut rates, they won't be successful in controlling inflation. As far as they're concerned, they're throwing the towel in and they're not really going to be bothered anymore immediately up until the election. What they're looking to do is let's get through this year 2024 and we'll leave it to the next administration, whether it's Biden, hopefully not, or Trump, please God, to deal with the massive debts that the US Treasury and the Fed have incurred, and one way out is obviously to push that big red button, which is the printing machine, and that will print in all the billions of dollars necessary to re-inflate the economy, and obviously inflation is going to be furnace up again in the fiery heat of economic growth, and we're going from the cycle of boom and bust. So enjoy the rate cuts as they come. This is Mayor Valensky with Driving Markets. You can share, subscribe, comment. I've got some books out on Amazon. You can also purchase those. I've got an Instagram account. You can follow that on a shortened version on a daily basis. That's it for now. Catch you later. Have a great 2024.